Yes, I'm saying that next week is that another committee should be meeting on the Wednesday. We rotate this formal sitting before the budget of next year. And there's some housekeeping matters that we have left. The first thing is that we had asked for some questions. There were questions asked of the student of the Universal Service Fund, re the hiring of a new GM or new ED, which is that what his post is, but we had asked for specifics on the hiring practices, etc. That info has not arrived. I understand it will arrive today, as will some additional information that was asked on NIDS. What I will do to members is ask the clerk as soon as a letter signed by Dan McIntosh, the permanent secretary. It says it's re-update on matters relating to O'Brien's International Car Sales and Rentals Limited. It says here, reference is made to the matter at caption and to your email dated January 11, wherein you requested a further update on the procurement of pre-owned vehicles for the Jamaica Consent Agreement. No. I go back to the point I'm making. I'm very dissatisfied with this. As members will know, year or May, I don't remember the exact month, we again in discussion here at committee to invite them to come. They told us they were in the middle of mediation. The committee met and said, we met in chambers, and we determined that we would give them a further 3 months. In September, we met again and asked about this, and we were told that mediation was underway and that we should get a result shortly. Now we're in January and we're getting this. And there are some questions that I have that are of grave interest to me, of real interest to me and to the committee. Number one, at the root of it were whether the duties, including GC, is an agreement. And you have not yet come back to us and indicated what the terms of that agreement is. This is, to me, unsatisfactory. I would seek the guidance of committee to suggest how we should move forward with this.
Mr. Chairman, you will recall that there was some amount of reservation or hesitation of some of us on the committee to go to mediation instead of taking straight legal action to recover the funds that the government has laid out for which it had no motor vehicles in return. The committee exercised great restraint to allow for a mutual resolution between the parties, that is the supply government. So from where I am, the opportunity I don't want to say non-legal because mediation might also be a legal mechanism, right? But they not going the ultimate step now would be a dereliction of duty. Having given that latitude in the first instance, and coupled with the point you made, Chairman, about how long we have been deliberating on this matter, I think that the suggestion mentioned in the letter you read about arbitration is only another step of prolonging a conclusion of this matter, which have been long overdue in the first instance. It needs to come to an immediate resolution.
Chair, I for one, in that last meeting, didn't feel that we should have done the in-camera session. But it begs the question to ask, who is it that the Ministry of National Security is trying to protect? Is it the taxpayers or is it the supplier? I remember there are some questions of who is it that will take care of the cost of the demurrage. the storage of the vehicles, which when we last met was in millions of dollars.
Yeah.
Who, at what stage is it that the government of Jamaica, through the Ministry of National Security, draws the line in the sand and take action? It cannot be that we're speaking about the whole issue of crime, and this is going nearly 3 years now that this matter has been an issue. The same action that the government is taking in respect to Petrojam shows that they have the will to take action when necessary, be it right or wrong. Why is this issue taking so long? And I think, Chairman, that the ministry should be brought back here very soon to deal with the issue of this. This cannot be something that is dealt with in secret, because this has passed, way past the time of this being dealt with urgency. You're talking about 200 million, you're talking about nearly 100 cars and only 30 delivered. It was claimed that 60 cars was sitting on the wharf. Yes. And we're still not sure if the 60 cars even exist or not. This is unacceptable, Chairman. Believe me. And I think we need to bring back the permanent secretary here to answer these questions, not in camera, but in the committee meeting here, that the public can know what is exactly happening with the taxpayers' money.
So,
that's the point I was going to make, Mr. Chairman. That's the point I was going to make, and I think Member Phillips would have. I think we should really invite the ministry back here to give some further clarification on what they have said in the letter. I believe that the subject matter really is the motor vehicles that were not delivered, and therefore we need to hear from them exactly.
Member Chair.
Chairman, it does appear as if there is a sleight of hand and delay tactics, and that has to be corrected, and it is very imperative that we bring back the Ministry of National Security here, because at a time when crime is on the rise, and myself in my own constituency, I'm short of cars for my 5 police stations, and that cannot be allowed to continue. So I would support the bringing back of the Ministry of National Security as early as possible to get the matters clarified.
All right. Yes, Member Campbell.
I think it may very well serve us well, because I don't know when we plan to have the next meeting, but we may want to frame a set of questions, because for the matter to have gone to mediation suggests to me that the matter is actually being litigated.
Being
litigated. Because if that is what is in fact being done, then we need to know. And I recall that the bond was going to be called, and so
we have no information on that either. The point I think you're making the point that all the things that we were promised, we really have not gotten the information.
So in the interim, we can frame the set of questions and send it on for specific answers.
Right, maybe we can get some help from members, but I'm pulling. But I think we should ask the questions. But 3 years ago, it great fanfare, 200 vehicles, etc. To date, we still have not, and despite all that has happened, we have not gotten the motor vehicles. It was referred over a year ago to the fraud squad and MOCA, and what has happened is that we wrote to, if members remember, we wrote to the police asking for a copy of the report. We have not received it. We heard the investigation was going on, and in the interim, taxpayers' money has been collected, held in a bond, told us what is happening with it. I think it's something that we need to look at seriously, and we will frame the questions, bring them back as soon as possible.
Chair, just some housekeeping.
Yes, remember, I'm giving, as I indicated before, we're at item 3. I'd actually given the welcome. This is a housekeeping matter, there are a number of things that are on our agenda which we are going to have to determine.
It ought properly to come on the 7th.
And you and I had this discussion last week. I don't think we have, but as I made the point, many members leave before, and then when we now bring the question the following week, you say it was not deliberated. So in openness and transparency, Member Campbell, I have absolutely not. All right, so members, with that in mind, we will proceed as per the committee's wishes. All right, with that, members, we will invite in the Student Loan Bureau, the Ministry of Education, I understand, is here, the Ministry of Finance, and University of the West Indies, and the University of Technology.
All the parties that are outside?
Yeah.
Okay, because I was going to say, just invite, rather than have them sitting on the outside, since it's an open meeting.
No, that's everybody.
Okay.
We're only doing this issue today.
Okay.
Nothing else. Welcome back, FS. Always good to have you. Always good to have you. Yes, how are you? Yes, please just make yourselves comfortable. Good morning, everybody. FS, welcome. PS. Members, we had indicated in November, I think it was, that we had wanted to have a discussion with certainly the and UTech, University of Technology, as well as the Student Loan Bureau on issues regarding the deregistration of students. At the time, there was a very topical issue registering. There was also a lot of discussion about the funding of the Student Loan Bureau, as well as the subventions to our tertiary institutions. So we had determined that we had wanted to have a discussion. This discussion really is just more for information and for us to determine what recommendations we can make to the Parliament as to assisting both the tertiary institutions and the students who attend in cutting down these numbers of students that are being deregistered, and what can be done with the Students' Loan Bureau to maybe further empower them in this case. There was one issue that I think we had a little discussion about, which I think is, for me, a very topical one. And again, this is really a fact-finding and for us to verify certain things, but we had heard that one of the issues is that often with students that are unable to pay all the tuitions, they weren't allowed to do the exams. And there was a feeling that it would be better for them if they were allowed to do the exams, even if the grades were withheld or the certificates or whatever, because what you find, if that were the case, that you're going to find students who if they come out and then have to go back, they'd have to go and do over the entire semester. And so really what we want is to have a discussion and see what the challenges are, what is the real situation, what can we do to help with that situation. I think the best way for us to proceed, members, as we discussed earlier, I think we will start with the Ministry of Education, who could probably give us a general overview, just to give us an idea of how you see it from the policy perspective. I would then ask the University of the West Indies and the University of Technology to give us their perspective. We could then turn it over, FS, to yourself and the Student Loan Bureau, and then at the end of that we can engage in a little dialogue to see what recommendations we could make. So with that, I welcome all of you to the committee. What I would do, PS, each person who leads the team, as I call on the institution, whoever is leading the team can identify themselves and introduce those members who are with them. And I would ask all members, when you're speaking, please identify yourself for the Hansard so that they can correctly attribute your comments. So with that, I will turn over to you, PS. Welcome.
Chairman and members, good morning to you. And certainly the Ministry of Education, Youth and Information welcomes the opportunity to discuss these approaches that we are using to reduce the instances of students being deregistered, and also to ensure greater access for our students at our universities. And so we have representatives from our ministry. Dr. Grace McLean, Chief Education Officer, is present. Dr. Felicia Marshall, she's the Assistant Chief Education Officer in charge of the tertiary unit. Mrs. Sonia Banton, our Principal Finance Officer. Mrs. Audrey Gentis McCallum, our Chief Audit Executive. Mr. Lincoln Johnson is our Senior Director, Compliance and Post-Audit. Dr. Damian Black is our Commissioner for the Jamaica Tertiary Education Commission. Given your comment that the university will introduce their members, I will just move on from there. The ministry was apprised, Chairman, in October 2018 of the deregistration of students from the University of the West Indies. And
the ministry was
apprised in October 2018.
October.
Of the deregistration of students from the university. And that had to do with challenges with making plans to honor their obligations to the institution. And at the time, the stats was that this affected 800 students. So the ministry's initial response was to meet with the authorities of both universities and to have discussions in order to avert any crisis in the sector, as we have done in the past. These efforts were successful and resulted in the situation being abated somewhat. The ministry is about access to tertiary education. We deem it a priority for the growth and development of Jamaica. And we recognize that the 20% access to tertiary education now is not satisfactory. And certainly the minister is on record that we want to flip that to at least 80% in the short to medium term. So the committee should note that some measures may consider deregistration measures extreme, and based on our conversation with the universities, this is an action of last resort. The first step we note is that students are periodically reminded of their need to meet their obligations and to explore avenues available to subsidize their studies. The truth, Mr. Chairman, is that some students resist applying for a loan from the SLB, not just out of fear of onerous repayment terms, but rather from having established different priorities. Chairman, University of the West Indies reported that although the decision to deregister students was a last resort, the move resulted in some students making good their payments or initiating payment arrangements to obligations to the university. And so the numbers are showing that from the 800 that were originally stated, they are just a little bit above 200 now in terms of students with challenges. The ministry has repeatedly articulated the position that there is general agreement that young persons must be encouraged and helped to pursue careers for personal and national development. At the same time, we must face the reality that tertiary level education is costly. It is a costly enterprise. The ministry supports the expansion of tertiary education, and the general philosophy is that students and parents should save towards tertiary education. At the same time, the ministry continues to support through a number of initiatives, including the JAMVAT program, the more vulnerable students to ensure and support their access to tertiary education. Just a brief synopsis, Mr. Chairman, on the JAMVAT program. It provides assistance for students for their tuition fees, qualify for admission to these institutions. Where they have found financial challenge, they gain access to the program, and they are provided with the opportunity to participate in the development of the nation's social capital through their contribution of 200 hours of public service. In response, the government pays 30% of the students' tuition costs to exceed $350,000 per annum per student. It supports the need for more scholarship arrangements for tertiary institutions for marginalized young persons. A special fund or trust for the education of children at the tertiary level, we believe, is also a signal move by the government. The SLB provides funding to students, and so students are able to access that. And the report is that up to 9% of those students who seek access to Student Loan Bureau for tertiary funding are actually approved for funding.
Repeat that number?
Between 98 and 99% of students who actually apply for support from SLB actually get
9% of people who
98
apply
to 99%
get funding?
That's the briefing that I have received on the matter. And so generally, we welcome the opportunity to have discussions over these matters. And we have the principals of both the University of the West Indies and University of Technology here. And I will, with your leave, sir, hand over to the principal for the university to introduce his team. With your leave. University of the West Indies.
All right, so, okay. So
as you had said. Right.
So,
thank you, Chairman. Good morning, colleagues.
and welcome.
My name is Weber, Dale Weber. I am the principal of the Mona campus of the University of the West Indies. With me this morning, Professor Ian Boxill, deputy principal, Dr. Camille Bell Hutchinson, our registrar, and Mr. Nigel Logan, our The University of the West Indies is very firm in its belief that access to tertiary education is important. In fact, our new strategic plan 2017-2022 speaks to access alignment and agility as the AAA strategy that we employ. Growing from a university of only 33 students in 1948 to 70 years later, we are in 2018, we celebrated 70 years of leadership and service with 18,000 students. As of this year, yesterday's registration is 19,100, so the numbers continue to grow. We've been able to offer this education not just at the university, but we've expanded to our Western Jamaica campus, and we have now committed to an online delivery using our open campus as well as the Mona campus facilities. And we are convinced that moving forward, we will need to do more online to try and get to the wider cross-section of Jamaica and indeed the world using specialized program. We've just committed as of this year to have 2 programs per year go online so that you can be at the University of the West Indies wherever you are, not just on the campus itself. The issue of deregistration is one that started as far back as 2008. Myself and the deputy principal are recently appointed. We've been with the university for 30 years, but we've recently been appointed principal and deputy principal. But our campus registrar has been our registrar for 11 years, and I would like to ask her to just outline the deregistration policy and what has happened over the last 10 years in terms of changes where we've softened the policy to where we are now.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, everyone. So as the principal said, yes, the issue of deregistration, or it probably wasn't called deregistration at the time, but
Sorry, could you identify yourself for the...
Camille Bell Hutchinson, Campus Registrar, UWI Mona. So the issue of deregistration has been with us for a while, or if I would clarify that, students until 2010 were not able to sit exams unless they had financial clearance. They would have been getting a physical exam card at that time, and if the exam card turned up blank, they wouldn't have been able to sit exams. Now, that financial clearance was not just to do with tuition fees. It was to do with any outstanding fees, whether it was tuition or residence. Somewhere around 2010, the then principal felt that it would be better for us to try to help the students to pay, along the way. So they may not have had it at the time that the exam timetable is out and they're getting ready to do exams, but they may come up with it before they sit exams. So at that time, we decided to soften the deregistration policy and allow students to pay at any time that they found the money. This sometimes took them way down to the wire, so sometimes just before exams, some would turn up. But then there were others who would be in the system. We knew they were in the system, they weren't blocked, and then they weren't able to do exams. And as I think you mentioned earlier, the first time that this, I would say, blew up on us was in 2012, when there were a number of students who we allowed to remain in the system in the hope that they would be able to pay the fees right just before exams. And that didn't occur. And a number of students were blocked from sitting exams. Some of you may remember it was a riotous affair with our guild. I think probably the first time since the Rodney riots. We had the guild really taking a stand at that point, disrupted exams, and felt that it was unfair. So in truth, what we had thought was a way to support them kind of worked against us in the sense that they were blocked just before the exam. The government also intervened and said, well, is there another way to do this? We discussed it with the guild, and at that time, because it was all the fees that were outstanding that created the issue, one of the decisions or one of the agreements we made with the Guild of Students is that we would separate residence fees from tuition fees for the purposes of tuition, for studies, for exams. And so at that time, we decided that the halls of residence would more closely monitor the payment of hall fees, which is in itself is also a high receivable, and we would not block students who were outstanding for hall fees, but we would find a way to monitor the tuition fees. Chair, the very recommendation you made, we attempted to do that. So what we did at the time was to let them progress in the semester and block from results and certificates for those finalizing students. We have, I would say, thousands of certificates in our exam center still that persons have gone through the system, not collected the certificates. I don't know how they have managed throughout their careers, but we have several hundred. It would take a project team to count the number of certificates we still have at the university for uncollected certificates for students with outstanding bills. The other thing about not giving the grades, that we found didn't work as well, because sometimes they found out the grades by other means. And so we had to revisit the policy and said what else we could do. The then principal introduced what we have as a scanning system, which is like what you'd have at the supermarket. So we introduced payment plans, and we said, okay, you pay 25% down, and then you pay the balance up to the period of exams, which would normally be in November. And we thought that would help. We encouraged them to go to the Student Loan Bureau to access loans. A number of our students are they're not very risky in terms of trying to get loans. The University of the West Indies have been encouraging them, have been counseling them to access more ways of financing their education. That has not worked very well. So we decided that we would ask for the payment plans, and also another set was introduced where we allowed them what we may want to call a free semester. So they then were able to progress. They were able to progress in a semester without paying that semester's fee. But in the following semester, they would not be able to register until the outstanding tuition fees were paid. And we thought that was meeting them at least halfway. That has worked to some extent, but the receivables shot up. So we found that for the students who were finalizing students, so they would pay for semester Thank you, Chair. So they would pay for semester one's fee in semester two, but then they would be able to progress through semester two, and the next time we would see fees would be in September if they are returning. What happened to us is that we found out, or we realized in tough ways, that those who were finalizing didn't pay semester two's fees and didn't come back and didn't pay the balance. So the receivables really skyrocketed. As a result of that, we had to again look back on the policy and put a new policy in place for finalizing students. We asked finalizing students, they could do a payment plan as the others are, but we wanted them to complete their fees before they sat their final exams if they were not returning to the university. That was introduced, I would think, 2 years ago. That worked well. In fact, I think the year that the government intervened, I think the PS spoke to that, was the first year that that was put in place, and they intervened and supported a number of finalizing students. At that time, we started out with maybe nearly 2,000. It dropped to about 800, and in fact, even with the understanding that the government was going to suppose to the students actually cover their fees before they sat exam. And now it is not an issue for finalizing students. We send out notices from the June preceding the academic year, and we give this year. A new policy was introduced when our new principal started, and this policy related to first-year students. And the belief of the management was that in entering the university, we felt it was reasonable to expect that you knew where the first semester's fee would be found. So what we asked our new students to have to pay the semester's fee before sitting exams. That's where we are with that policy at this point. We had over 2,000 students at the beginning of our exams who were needing to be clear. That number has fell significantly, and the data we have provided shows, I think, that we have just about 300 students who never did find that fee at all. The total population of our first-year students was about 6,000. So, Chair, where we are now, we have 3 policies in existence, one for our first years, one for our finalizing, and the one that has always been there for our second continuing students, where they go through a semester without paying, but in order to proceed to the next semester, you have to pay the outstanding fees. That's for our continuing students. Our first year students, we're asking to pay the fees before exams, either through the semester, either through a payment plan or entire semester's fee, and we do the same for our finalizing students. In that way, we're hoping that the huge receivables we have will fall. At the same time, Chair, I think I must say that we also have facilities. We encourage students, not only for Students' Loan Bureau, there are scholarships, and we refer them to our financial aid office to ensure that they are making full use of all the available sources for funding. And we do try to consistently keep in touch with them, because our view is that we want the students to complete their education, but at the same time we have to be very mindful of the dire financial state that our university is in at this time.
Okay, University of Technology.
Thank you, Chairman. Good morning, Chairman. Good morning, members. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. The University of Technology, Jamaica, is grateful for the opportunity to take part in this important PAAC meeting on access to education for students at the tertiary level. We have received 3 requests for information from the PAAC and have sought to respond to the items raised in each request. The documentation from UTech sets out responses to the questions received. The university is committed to ensuring access to tertiary education and seeks to retain students when they enter the university community. We recognize, however, that most of our students have financial challenges on the way to completing their studies. With this in mind, we have sought to put in place a system which allows students to remain at university subject to conditions that are compatible with the prudent management of the institution. We seek, as far as possible, to take our students through to completion. Education, in our view, is key to self-actualization and personal development. Equally, essential to national development and socio-economic advancement. These core considerations, together with the need to preserve the financial viability of the university, guide our policy on registration of students. So, at the start of the semester, $28,000 for new students, $25,000 for returning students. Second, after paying this enrollment commitment fee, the student is required to pay fees in full by a specified date called the census date. For semester 1 of this academic year, the census date was October 26, 2018. So you start in late August, you have near to the end of October to pay the fee. Thus, students had about 8 weeks from the start of teaching in which to pay their fees. Third, if a student is unable to pay fees, she or he may enter into a payment plan with the university. Usually, for a payment plan, the student is called upon to pay 55% of the fee and undertake to pay the remainder at a later date. With a payment plan in place, the student has rights of a fully paid up student and most importantly, may take examinations. And once you take the examinations, you are fully entitled to the results of the examination. Fourth, if a student is unable to pay fees by the census date and does not enter into a payment plan, he or she may still take examinations at the end of the semester. The student may do this by paying fees in full up to 1 week before the final examinations. The student who takes this approach is required to make a late fee payment of about $8,000. So you can disregard the system and up to 1 week before the exams, turn up with the fees plus $8,000 and you are allowed to take the examination. Fifth, students who cannot afford to pay their fees are encouraged to seek assistance. The university is grateful to the Students' Loan Bureau for the assistance provided by the Bureau to our students. For the academic year 2017 to 18, for example, the SLB provided loans to about 3,176 UTEC students out of a population of about 11,500 students. We are also grateful to the government of Jamaica, local private sources, and international private sources. For 2017 to 18, the government of Jamaica provided assistance to 562 students. Local private sources assisted 288 through the institution, and 55 students received international support. In addition, scholarships are available to students. In 2017 to 18, 1,157 students obtained scholarships. Sixth, the university also seeks to provide financial assistance. For 2017 to 18, the university provided 109 scholarships. I should note that on Friday, this Friday coming, we are presenting 60 additional scholarships to mark the 60th anniversary of the university, 60 at $100,000 each. In 2017 to 18, 331 students took part in the university's Earn and Study program, working within the university, and 2,212 students received welfare assistance from the university. In sum, for 2017 to 18, approximately 7,779 students out of 11,500, approximately 7,779 out of 11,500 at UTEC, received some form of assistance with their studies through institutional sources. As to the financial value, for 2017 to 18, external and internal scholarships amounted to more than $47 million, student welfare about $23 million, and earn and study about $24 million, making a total of about $94 million in assistance to students. I should make a few additional points about access. One is that some students at the university who have not paid fees until late in the semester have hitherto not been able to gain access to online resources at the university. This policy has been changed by the university's academic board from this semester onwards. So going forward, as long as a student has paid the enrollment commitment fee, that student should not be disadvantaged in the period before she or he pays the full fee. Our records indicate that for 2017-18, 595 students who entered the UTEC system did not complete their enrollment and did not therefore take their examinations. We are concerned about this number and regard it as far too high. This is one factor which has caused us to move towards making online material available to all who pay the enrollment commitment fee, even though there are suggestions that this move could affect the university's cash flow. Finally, I should note that the university is funded primarily by student fees. In very broad outline, the university receives a subvention from the government of Jamaica of the order of about $2 billion. 17-18, it was $2.266 billion. But the university has expenses of the order of $7 billion. So we receive 2, we have expenses of 7. The bulk of the difference, approximately $4 billion, is required to cover costs from student fees. The difference is 5, and we have third sources for about 1, and so we need to get $4 billion from student fees to run the university. The university has sought to obtain an increase in the government of Jamaica subvention, particularly in light of our desire to promote parity and fairness among tertiary level institutions. But this effort is yet to receive financial support. And Mr. Chairman, I must apologize because I did not introduce the members of my team at the outset. And I would like to point in terms of students who have enrolled and have not completed. For 2017 to 18, the total figure was 595 students out of 11,500 students. And finally, in terms of the value of scholarships, I mentioned already, but I'll reiterate. For 2017 to 18, $47,400,416 were provided in scholarships, internal and external. $23 million was provided for student welfare, and $24 million was paid out for the Earn and Study program. So we are trying our best to facilitate the students, but we also have to be mindful of cash flow and receivables. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Bro. FS?
Okay, good morning. Darlene Morrison, Minister of Finance, and the Students' Loan Bureau is here as well. It's Monica Brown, company. The Ministry of Finance and the SLB actually came to the PAAC today in relation to responses we had provided for questions asked, which were not specifically related to UWI and UTEC. So we don't really have a position per se on the issue that you are discussing. I can indicate though that with respect to the Students' Loan Bureau's provision of loans, the 98.8% and 99.2% UWI and UTEC is what the approval rate is for loans that have that have gone through the full application process. That was for this year, for 2018-19. For 2017-18, it was at 99.6 and 99.3 UW and UTech respectively. In 2018-19, this would have represented, the total applications that completed would have represented 4,457 for UWI and 3,833 for UTech. Okay, disbursed, okay. To date, okay, disbursed to date. There are more applications than that would have initially been made, but as we would have indicated in the prior appearance, not all applicants complete the process. So the figures, the 99 and 98, are in relation to the completed applications. That's it.
Okay, does the Student Loans Bureau want to, or is that covered? Is everything covered there?
It basically covers the issues, disbursements, UTech, UE, and as the FS said, the disbursements to date for UE Mono, $559 million, and for UTech, $444 million. And disbursement continues throughout the academic year. And disbursement is also subject to receipt of confirmation of registration from the schools. So as soon as we receive confirmations of registration, we are usually put in a position to disburse. So we continue that process.
Just some clarity. What percentage of the tuition do you fund? If I'm studying and my school fees are $300,000 a year, a semester, and I come to you, what happens next?
For the government-sponsored programs, those are funded 100%.
Government-sponsored programs.
Right.
That is, could you just clarify for us?
Well, in the case of UE, for example, the social science programs, those come under the government subsidy, and they can correct me if I'm wrong, but this is the premise on which we have been operating over the years. For the traditional programs, those have been subsidized. Those are under the subsidized facilities. More recently, in the last 8 years, 10 years, they have introduced a number of full cost programs. So there are 2 streams for the medical program, for example. The regular program that is subsidized by government, I think that is about 600 and odd thousand for the year. Whereas for the full cost program, it's about, it works out to Jamaica dollar about 3.6 million or so. So the Students Loan Bureau provides a maximum of $1 million under the targeted
per year
for the year for the non-GOG subsidized program. However, they can also access the pay-as-you-study program and get another $1 million. But that facility, the latter facility, has to be paid back from salary each month. So each student under the non-GOG sponsored facilities can access a maximum of $1 million under the targeted program. That's a traditional loan that SLB offers, as well as $1 million under the pay-as-you-study program, which is salary deducted.
Just one question would come to me. If that is the case, and you're saying a number of these programs is 100% in the government targeted programs, and we'll go into that in a little more detail. At the start of this discussion, the Permanent Secretary indicated that 90 to 99% of the students who applied got through, were approved.
Approved for loans.
So my question is, where then would the problem be? Because if you are able to be in a program, if 98% of them are getting funding of the applicants, well, that's what I'm trying to clarify.
Yeah, let me
So
clarify.
no, I need some clarity there, because my problem is just if you hear the words, there shouldn't be a problem, because if somebody has a challenge, they apply,
Yeah.
and if 98 to 99% of them are successful,
Yes.
then they would get the support. Now, if you're getting the support, where's the fallout?
The issue is, although 98, 99% is approved, the take-up is roughly 80%. So some students opt not to go forward with the application process in terms of completing, providing the documentation
the
to allow
take-up
us to
is-
disburse.
When you, yeah, well, no, we just, yeah, but let them,
No, I think.
well, let them
Brown,
clarify. Let them-
No, I think, all right, let us say UE. What percentage of those entering UE would have come to the student loan and be apply and approved? So you have 100,000 students entering in this academic year. What percentage of those are aided by the student loan?
So
Chairman.
for me?
Chairman, our numbers tell us we have 22.5% of university students, University of the West Indies students, applying for the students' loan.
Applying.
In total.
So that's like a quarter.
And
Apply.
Right, and 98% of them are successful by what we've heard from the Students' Loan Bureau.
Yeah,
but
uh-huh.
less than a quarter of them apply. They are loan averse in terms of investing in their own education.
So the majority of those entering the university
Do not
don't
apply.
They come
Do
on
not
their
apply.
own
No,
financing.
yeah, but I'm trying to get to the root of it, because if students apply, they want to get a tertiary education, they're either finding the tuition on their own and they're getting to the point where they can't afford it. Then the obvious course would be to go for a loan. So I'm just trying to say, you're saying only 25% apply. Is it that the terms of application, what is necessary, it makes it so difficult that many of them don't apply because they cannot meet the criteria for application? Or is it that they just don't feel like applying and would prefer not to go on?
Each year we get on average 14,000 applications, and the approval rate is very high. The take-up rate, though, in terms of students following through with the process and completing is below 90%. There are students who have not applied to the Students' Loan Bureau. So in the case of UE, of the 19,000 students, we got applications from 4,457 of them for 2018-19. So there are a number of students who are not interested in getting a loan to pay their tuition, although they have no other financial arrangement to pay their fees. They're not interested in getting loans in a number of cases because it would appear they do not want to have the responsibility of paying back debt. So they leave students' loan as a last resort. So if they don't have to apply, they do not apply. They try to find other ways of paying their fees before they come to the Students' Loan Bureau. But the facility is there, and each year consistently approximately 14,000 or so of them access the loans.
Chairman.
So, yes, but just to clarify, so you're saying that a number of these persons are now getting to the point where they are having difficulty, their exams are coming up, they owe some funds, are they at that point where it is becoming an issue? When they go to the, you had said, the financial aid office, at that point, would they be referred to SLB? And you're saying that for many of these students, rather than taking the SLB, they come out of the program? Is that what we're understanding, or is there something else that we're missing?
Which is what I would like to probe a little bit.
Yeah,
Chairman.
Member Paul.
Yes. I am confused. As Member of Parliament, this is one of the categories that Professor Vassiano didn't mention. As Member of Parliament, I contribute substantially to tuition costs for students who live in my constituency. And next time you speak, Professor, apart from government, you should also mention that, you know, we as MPs, we do make our contribution, but
if I may,
invariably, it's all right.
Just to say that you are counted among local private sources.
Repeat that. Local private sources.
Yeah, we like to be in a different category, but because we have to get the endorsement of our electors, so people should know this. But invariably, when students come to me for assistance, I always inquire of them of their responsibility, and that a tertiary education is an investment in yourself. And they say to me that they have tried the route of the Students' Loan Bureau and have been frustrated. So my question is, when is an application an application? They complain, for example, that in trying to get guarantors, they are frustrated because family members, I gather, can't be guarantors, and a whole heap of other things associated with the application process. So is it when you receive a properly completed application that it is regarded as an application? What of those who come in and they want to pursue a loan but cannot because on the application form there are certain requirements that initially they can't meet? I inquire of everybody because I don't believe, because we can't afford it now, one day this country should be able to provide free university education to those who need it. But I do believe that in the same way that I'm contributing, the individual students should make a contribution. And the way to do so for the poor student is through the Students' Loan Bureau. And perhaps just to complete my second question, your public education program used to be quite active, and I see so many ministries now advertising all kinds of things that I don't believe really require public education. But certainly the role of the Students' Loan Bureau, your process, ought to be the subject of appropriate public education. All I see from time to time are your delinquencies, which is another matter of interest, I'm sure, for this committee, and probably you could comment on that. But, so I'm confused as MP. I contribute substantially every year, and Professor Vassiano, just put a category for members of parliament. That's how we are able to convince people to vote for us.
All right, so, yes.
The applications that we get at the Students' Loan Bureau, those are done online. So the students apply and they pay a fee, and their application is accepted and processed. They also need to furnish guarantors, and the policy requires 2 guarantors. More recently, that has been adjusted to allow for 1 guarantor in instances where persons are not able to come up with 2 guarantors. There are also instances where persons who do not have guarantors are allowed to access a student loan. There's a special facility for that through the appeals committee process. So we do accommodate students who have difficulties providing guarantors. We also allow for corporate guarantors, and we have seen where some schools have stood as guarantors and some other entities. So the application process is fairly straightforward. It requires that you furnish some documents to support your application, TRN, identification, that sort of thing. The process, in my view, is not onerous, but some students do not really treat it with the level of seriousness that they ought to treat it with, bearing in mind that they, in a number of cases, do not necessarily alone. So when they go to their MPs and complain that they cannot get through to the SLB, it is not necessarily so, because we are very accommodating in terms of allowing access, because we recognize the importance of persons lifting their social status, benefiting from economic mobility through tertiary education. And that is what we are there for. So we are very accommodating. I have the loan processing manager here with me as part of the team, and his team is very, very accommodating in terms of allowing persons to access students' loan.
But specifically, is there a time frame within which persons can apply? In other words, I get back to the point that we're trying to target today. There are students that are being deregistered. So let's say I run into trouble November, going into exams or in the second semester, or whatever it is. I have not applied for a student loan at the start of the year, but I find myself in challenges. Can I apply?
The application process normally opens around mid-February and it goes on to the end of May. However, there's
mid-February till May for the September term.
Right. Because we need time to process the application.
Absolutely, but I'm saying if so you have February to May, so you have that 3-month period.
Yes.
You encourage people to apply, but I get into trouble in the midst of my process. I've run up into a wall, and my last resort is student loan. What do I do at that point?
Yes, and I was going on to say, in addition to the formal period, February to May for applications, there's also a late application period, which is continuing even now. So students who did not apply for the 2018-19 period and are late, and in exceptional cases now we may allow, and we have been allowing late applications up to now. So students who come to us, we find a way of accommodating them. So that's for a targeted facility. There's a late fee attached, of course. For the pay-as-you-study facility, that is available all year round.
What would that late fee be, just as a matter of interest?
The late fee, I think, is about $5,000. $5,000.
Okay. No,
right.
But let me just go back, and I think members, I think it's a critical point. We are looking at students who at some point might run into a challenge. To me, those are the very students that you're hoping that a student loan bureau, if there are possibilities, would. So if I was in trouble, especially if I'm near the end of my course or whatever, and I realize I'm in trouble, the course of action would be student loan bureau. So do you get a lot of those applications for persons? We had heard a number of students, I think somewhere between 300 and 500, I've been hearing the figure around, that got into problem. Do you get this surge of applications around that period of time, or are you finding that they do not apply?
I do not think those are the ones who apply, because if the period for application opens in May, and this is now January, February, and they have not applied for a student's loan. It means that they're not interested in applying for a student's loan. However,
so you're saying
yes.
So you're really saying that the majority of these students that are in trouble you are not seeing them come to the Student Loan Bureau?
Well, I guess some of them would have come, but not a whole lot. For the late application period, I think about 1,000 to 2,000 persons would have submitted late application. So those persons are having difficulties at the university and want to access a student loan may be included in those late applications.
1,000 is a lot. We had heard between 300 and 500 persons who were in trouble. So
but this is one institution, so this is for the
but I'm just saying, so
system.
If we extrapolate, now if you're saying you're getting 1,000, what is the approval rate of that within that 1,000 late application? Do you have that?
Most of those.
Is it the same 98%?
Yes, most of those usually get approved. The majority of those get approved.
All right.
Yes. And I was going on to say, in terms of the late applications, the PSU study facility is available all year round. So persons who find themselves in a problem and want to access a student loan can, in fact, access a student loan. However, it has to be salary deducted. So somebody has to be working and is able to pay monthly for that loan.
All right. Member Stewart, is there anybody? Member Phillips. Member Dunn.
Thank you, Chairman. Through you to our professors Bassiani and Weber. What percentage of our students who are deregistered actually return to complete their degrees at their universities? And to the FS.
Wait, hold on, one at a time. You can just ask. I'll allow you can go on after.
Chairman.
You're asking this specifically of UE or UE and UTech? Both? Yes.
Chairman,
yes, Prof.
We would have to go through the entire university cycle of a student to see if and when they completed their programs. But what we can offer is, of the 827 who were deregistered at the start of the process, 65% of those found a way to make a payment and get back on track. So we would think that 65% of them got back into the system at that time.
And you're saying you're down at about 300 that still have a challenge, if I remember correctly.
Chairman, I would recall that we do not deregister persons. So for our system, there would be some people who have just not paid any fees at all in a particular semester, or they would have paid just the enrollment commitment fee and would not have done anything else. They wouldn't be allowed to do the examinations, but quite a few of them come back. We don't have that precise figure now, but some of them would come back in a subsequent semester because of how our programs are structured. You can come back.
But bro, all right, understanding what you're saying that, say I'm a student, I go through and at the end of the semester I've not been able to pay. Yes. I'm in my second year,
yes,
halfway through a course. I'm unable to pay.
Yes.
Exam time comes up.
Yes.
You don't deregister me, but you're saying that I'm not allowed to do the exam?
No, Chairman, with respect. For a student to be in a position of not being enrolled to do the exam, that student would have had to ignore making a payment up to 55%. That student would have had to choose not to speak to anybody in our Office of Finance.
Oh, no, I was only saying, I thought that's what you said. No, I thought you had said you don't deregister, but some were not allowed to take the exam. That's what I was trying to explore.
Yes, and I'm identifying the persons who would be in that category. It's a person who has not paid any fees other than the enrollment commitment fee, which is $25,000. So that person would not only have not paid, but would have distanced him or herself from the system, because we make payment plans with the students. You come to us, I'm sure we recommend sometimes you go to the Students' Loan Bureau, but it's also the case that we make payment plans with individuals. So those people may have decided, for this semester, I'm not going to proceed. I don't have the money. I don't see how I'm going to get the money for this semester. But I will come back next semester. And that happens.
Just one additional question. How do you engage these students? Do you reach out to them, or they would have to reach out to you?
No, we reach out to them. We provide information as to the date by which payments are due and indicate if you can't make the payment, come in and talk to our Office of Finance about a payment plan. We reach out to them through various means, social media and other means of communication.
Okay.
Yes.
Prof. Weber?
Chairman, I'd just like to add, I think both institutions go a remarkable way to reach out to students from as early as possible. We have at least 6 notices that go out to students from August saying what they can do, what the options are. We have 3 offices, the Office of the Registrar, Admissions, you have the bursary has a customer service, and there's the Office of Student Financing. So there's a reach out, and the first question is always, have you applied for a student's loan? And there is then the various combinations. But we get good information from that communication. For instance, we learned that the student's loan actually offered loans at preferential rates on the STEM programs, which made some students then reconsider and apply to get such an advantage. But on the other side, we also heard that the student's loan would only loan for upcoming semesters. If they had an arrears balance, the loan would not allow them to take that arrears down.
Okay, Member Stewart hadn't finished.
Thank you, Chairman. Pierce, the Minister of Education, in his pronouncements recently, spoke to the fact that he would love to see or get 80% of the country's tertiary students at the tertiary level. Has there been a costing been done and to the PS? Is there any consideration being given from the Ministry of Finance level for increasing the amount of funds that go to the Student Loan Bureau?
Mr. Chairman, the pronouncement made would support tertiary funding policy that we are putting together. And that would involve the overall cost of funding up to 80% of those students that we're thinking about, and also to earmark funding in particular areas, especially the areas of STEM, as would have been outlined. So that study is still being done, and we are putting together the documentation for a cabinet submission, and thereafter we'll be able to give the full costing as to what that will be like. But the vision is that we will have those 80% students, 8% of our students registered in our tertiary institutions and graduating fully trained and certified at the tertiary level.
In tertiary institutions across the board?
Across the board. Across the board. Right now, the stats are showing that.
You're saying you're at 20% now?
We're at 20%, roughly 20%.
Just running some rough figures, and if you're going to move up, you're talking 4 times the amount. You want to take
4 times the
80.
amount, yes.
And your total subvention to tertiary institutions now is how much?
For the 2 universities?
About 10 billion?
About 17 billion.
17 billion.
Yes.
So you're looking to find about another 50 billion, roughly. Have you mentioned this to the Financial Secretary?
I am saying, Mr. Chairman, already.
This is a matter of interest.
No, but already we have the CAP program and the occupational studies program that will give them an associate degree, and we are
No, but I'm just making the point that if you have a rough figure and you're looking
No, but Chairman, I wouldn't calculate it like that.
I'm just giving it a rough.
Because there's actually already funding in place that we are targeting for students who are doing their first 2 years in our community colleges and in our high school programs. So it is not a case where we multiply by 4. That's not what the math would look like.
Okay.
So because there is already funding being injected into the system as we speak towards assisting students to gaining that tertiary education. So we're not going to be starting from 0. We are somewhere down the wicket already.
All right. Okay. No, 1 second. I have member done before.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and good morning, everyone. I think I was remarking in the corridor, as a beneficiary of education from the 2 tertiary institutions present here today, UE and UTech, I'm very appreciative of the services of the individuals within the institution and the quality of students that they're graduating each year. Just in listening, however, the problem, Mr. Chairman, seems to be in the ability of students to access financing for education, because with all due respect, both institutions requires funding to carry out their affairs and to ensure that they graduate the quality of candidates that they want from their institution. So my suggestion, well, one question is for the Student Loan Bureau in particular. I do not know, and if you can provide me the answer, do you go into the high schools on a regular basis to promote student loans? That's number one. Because, I'm from a poor background, and I remember when I was going to tertiary institution, I never knew anything about loans. So have we educated persons enough that loans is not loans in themselves, but loans are investment in the individual, and therefore they would appreciate that fact that they are invested in their future. So they have to buy into that process of wanting to invest in their future. So have we spent enough time educating our students about this investment? Number 2, for the high schools again, is it that, but as a course, I know you're going periodically with job fairs and education fairs, but is that sufficient enough, or there should be something in the grade 11 and our 6th form, especially first year, that directly targets students to this particular facility, and therefore they become more inclined to rather than averse to accessing in the particular loans? And the third thing is that I can see where you in particular has really tried various different methods of trying to deal with this issue. But UTech seem to have something which I don't know if you will want to emulate, although your governance structure is a little different and you have to answer to different players rather than in the case of UTech, there's answers to UTech and the government of Jamaica. But UTech has gone further of not deregistering students, which is so good, because at least you allow that student through the entire education process. But the important thing is that, and I hope this is not lost in at all, because although you take them through this process of not deregistering them or deregistering them, they need to understand that paying the fee is important, and the fact that they have gone through and not being deregistered is not an attempt to give them a certification without the investment that they are supposed to make. So there's just a caution on that. I'm not sure how you have managed that process very well. But in terms of student loan, though, could you just answer, do you have this structured program within the high schools?
The Students Loan Bureau have a program where we go into the high schools each year, and based on the record for the 2018 period, we did over 18 institutions, most of which are high schools. So we go into the high schools across the length and breadth of Jamaica to sensitize the students in relation to the products and services of the Students' Loan Bureau and the options that they have for financing their tertiary education. So that facility is in place. The Public Relations and Public Education Department has charge of that function. So yes, that happens on an ongoing basis. And the ramping up of that program is in recognition of the need to provide the information to these young people so they're aware of the options. A number of us are from rural area, and when I was coming up through high school, I wasn't aware that there was a Student Loan Bureau that we could access for funds. And a number of my colleagues can attest to that as well. And in recognition of that, we recognize the need to step up the program of going into the schools and as part of our public education campaign. So yes, we have been going into the schools. We did about 80 last year, and about 90% of that was the high schools.
Can I just follow up with something else, please? Sorry. For the persons, I think the chairman and maybe member Phillips had asked a question. You know, what about the persons who would have missed that initial application period, which is in February, up to February? And they were dependent on other methods of finance their education. They're down to the wire now at the start of school, and there's nothing in place. The question is there a registration desk at the institutions that facilitate the students who would have missed that particular period? So at both UA and UTech, during that registration period, is there a desk for student loan present at that point?
There's no desk at the institution per se now, but during the peak period, there is a partnership with the institutions where the SLB officers go in and they assist in processing the applicants, accepting documents, etc. But for persons who would want to access the Students' Loan Bureau and a loan at this time, they would need to come directly to us.
Chairman, might I just as a suggestion going forward, the University of the West Indies would like to therefore offer for the Students' Loan Bureau to accompany the University of the West Indies, and I'm sure my colleagues at UTech would do the same. We go to a number of schools on our recruitment drives, and we do have a section that says financing your education. But it would be so good to have somebody from the Students' Loan Bureau with us on that tour to be able to feed it at the very start.
I think you're correct. I think maybe all the institutions could look at it. I think one of the difficulties that may arise with students is a lot of these applications are made online. Am I correct? And the process, if there are persons in these institutions who can guide students as to the needs and the way to do it, it may be helpful. Given the situation. So I think your suggestion is timely. Professor?
Thank you, Chairman. I'd like to thank Principal Weber for that suggestion as well. Yes, it's something that we would embrace enthusiastically. I wanted to say, though, that in our system, we encourage responsibility because we insist that the student must come in to complete a payment plan. So with reference to the member's comments about the caution, we are mindful of it and we appreciate the reminder. One of the things that we have found concerning students and loans is that the student's loan is likely to be the first major transaction that someone graduating from high school will enter into. So even though they will know about the concept of the student's loan, there is a fear
Absolutely.
which comes from not understanding how these things work. So we find, for instance, that we have to sometimes encourage students to say, no, you will be able to pay back this money when you have graduated, because they are fearful that they can't meet that commitment. Others also feel, well, if I can get the money from other sources. No, because in fairness, and I mentioned local private sources a while ago, the MPs make a major contribution. We have also had commitments from the government of Jamaica.
Yeah, continue, Prof.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, we received from MPs, from parish council members, and from private enterprise as well. and we're very grateful for that on behalf of the students. But we are aware that because, and UTech does it too, but because there are these alternative sources, some students go to the alternative sources and avoid the Students' Loan Bureau. So for UTech, it's about 32% of our students who go through the Students' Loan Bureau. 32%. When we look at the situation on the ground, that it should be more. Yes, but so there needs to be a conscious effort to keep convincing people year after year.
Yeah, I think that's a very valid point. Members, in other words, I think the Student Loan Bureau, the extent to which they can go out and be very helpful. But there's another point too, that a number of the students are saying that in that sort of university village, a sort of Mona and the apartments and so forth, that the cost of residency, of accommodation for these students over the years has risen quite a bit, and there's also that cost. Is that dealt with separately, or is it now something that is almost enjoined to the tuition fees?
Our Georgia Lane Hall, a double room is $30,000 per month of student services and development. So we're trying to find ways in which the students are better able to manage those payments. We still do, as I said, do have a high receivable for our halls of residence. Yeah. But when the fees are set, and that's done activities that we do, the students do pay a separate hall attachment fee to help with the co-curricular activities and the leadership programs that take place outside of the classroom.
Prof, you're similar, or?
Our situation is that we have only about 600 students living on campus at Papine, and the sums they pay are significantly less than $190,000 per.
Roughly.
The rough figure, I was trying to ascertain the exact figure, but I'm not in a position to provide it now. I think it's approximately 100.
Oh, so maybe 60%.
Yeah.
Wow. All right. Okay. No, I have member Daly who has been waiting patiently.
Thank you, Chairman. Just a quick follow-up in regards to the spaces on have enough space to accommodate students, if they are so desired. And let me just finish quickly. In terms of in regards to the paying back, the different collecting agencies and persons that you use to assist in enhancing collection, what percent back for their service given? Is it more?
I think that the Student Loan Bureau?
Yes.
The second part would be for the Student Loan Bureau and the first.
Yeah, thank you very much. In regards to the paying back, and what kind of fee, in terms of not just the actual fee, but the percentage the persons who are delinquent have to pay back when paying back, if you're
at least another 600 students. So we have been in preliminary discussions about expansion that would involve putting up another hall of residence. Now, there is a question for us too, because we have receivables, including student non-payment, and we have an office which seeks to track that down, but for more aged receivables, we rely on an external agent, and that external agent gets 18%? 18% of the 1/8 of the sums recovered.
No, from what's
yes,
collected.
it's owed to us.
Oh, so
It's owed to us. When they collect what is
you
owed to
give
us,
them
they
back
take
1/8.
18%. Yes, 18%.
18%?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Is that the same for you, the Student Loan Bureau? Do you have internal collection or?
The Students' Loan Bureau has staff who are involved in collecting on loans, and those are staff, so they are salaried. In terms of the agents, they are internal debt collectors who are commissioned, the agents, and there are external debt collectors. For the internal debt, the commission is roughly 15% on average, and for the external collectors, it ranges between 20 and I think 24%. So that
what
is
are
the
the
commission.
mechanisms? I mean, what do they do that you can't do, for example?
Well, these are chronically these are chronically delinquent borrowers, and we do not have the hard infrastructure to chase up these persons across the length and breadth of the island. Some of them are overseas, and these debt collectors, they have skills in that area, so they are able to use whatever means to
really
locate
to
some of
find
these
out what
persons.
skills those were, but nonetheless, all right.
Yeah.
Chairman, it might be that they have better smiles when they go asking, sir. Can I respond for the UWI, sir?
Sure.
So we have 11 halls of residence with over 5,000 spaces for students. In fact, we currently have some UTech students, and we'd be willing to take more, Stephen. So we can talk about that as a possibility.
I think he's willing to take them if you can drop it from 180 to 100.
That, as I'm about to comment, Chairman, that I thought I was becoming the principal of an academic institution, but I found out very quickly I'm a CEO of a large company.
Absolutely.
So I to invite those who wish to stay at a cost that is comparable to those who are currently staying. But that said, we also have, for our long outstanding debts, we also have a collection mechanism, and my bursar informs me that it's percent that the collector gets for having removing the emotion and collecting on our behalf.
Member Campbell.
Chair, thank you, Chair.
Hold on, Prof. There was a follow-up. You wanted just to add something to that?
Yes, Chair. Thank you. It is to say I have now been able to ascertain the exact cost for Farquharson Hall. It's $123,875, which is considerably less than what UWI is offering at the moment. But we can talk.
I have a feeling that there's going to be a response shortly. But Member Campbell, go ahead.
Let me first, thank you, Chair. Let me first direct my first question to Ms. Brown from SLV. The figure from UA in terms of the take-up is 22.5%. And using your present numbers, if you were to move that figure to a take-up figure of 50%, how much would that be your additional cost?
Of the 20,000 UE students, about 22% applies to the Students' Loan Bureau. So that's about 4,000 or so. So if we were to increase it to 50, it would be about 8,000 to 10,000 applicants. And in terms of the amount required to fund those 8,000 to 10,000 applicants, it would be a significant amount. So on average, we disbursed to UA. Last year, for example, we disbursed 0.4 billion for the 22%. So that would at least be doubled. So that would be $2.5–3 billion that we're looking at, 2.6 billion, I gather, that we would be looking at in terms of disbursements to that institution.
And in terms of your collections, do you have those funds? Let's say you were to have the movement up to 50%. Would you have those funds to make the distribution?
We would not be able to accommodate such a significant increase in the amount to be disbursed to one institution without additional injection of funds. For the year, we collect about 3.5 billion. And if we are to give one institution 2.6 billion out of that, that would significantly deplete our resources. So it would mean that there are some institutions who would not be able to get full allocation unless there is external injection. So there would need to be additional injection of funds for us to accommodate a doubling of the disbursement to UA.
So in real terms, you are not in a position to finance an increase, whether it is from UTEC or University of the West Indies?
Well, if you're talking about 5% increase as against a 50% increase or a doubling, you know, it makes a difference. So if it's a small increase, then we should be able to accommodate it.
Wow.
But for a huge increase, we won't
well,
be
given
able
the
to.
numbers who don't apply, and because for one reason or the other, they don't apply. Let's say that they were to now decide you're going out on a marketing program and you're selling your services to them. And I know you have a history of going out to Petrocarib and all those. How would it? How? Well, but you know, there are other financial institutions. But how would you be able to finance the increases? Let's not move it to 50%. Let's move it to 35%. And you're really seeking an additional $2 billion across the two major institutions, that is. But given the difficulties you have experienced in the past, how would you see yourself being able to finance that?
In the past, we have accessed borrowing to make disbursements to students. And borrowing comes at a cost. And in addition to the cost, which is the interest cost, there's also the foreign exchange risk that we bear for the borrowings, the current borrowings that we have from the CDB and from the Petrocarib Fund. So borrowing is an option, but I do not know that we would want to go that route now. There are also other options. There was a recent study that was done, a recent review that was done by a consultant, and one of the recommendations is that the Students' Loan Bureau, in conjunction with the government of Jamaica, should look to an education bond. And the proposal is that this would be directed at primarily at the deposit-taking institutions supervised by the central bank. So that is a proposal that has been made, and it is something that the board will deliberate on. We have gone the route before of accessing funds through the central bank by release of some of the cash reserves, and we were able to borrow at a concessionary rate. So we have gone that route before. But we would have to be guided, and that would have to come out of authorization from our parent ministry. So that is another option in terms of looking at how the private sector could assist in any additional funding that is required to satisfy increased disbursements.
Just one clarity, Member Campbell. The second option you said, could you just clarify? You said with the financial institutions. What was that?
In the past, what the Bank of Jamaica did was release some of the cash reserve to the banks, and they were able to lend to the Students' Loan Bureau at a concessionary rate, because the cash reserves at the Bank of Jamaica, it attracts no interest. No interest is paid on it. So the banks were able to deploy those funds to the Students' Loan Bureau and earn an interest on it. So it's a similar proposal that is coming out of the recent study.
Similar to what?
Right.
All right, go ahead.
Chairman, there's one other area that I need some understanding, and perhaps PS will be able to deal with this one. The distribution over the two major institutions. I see where you funding UE to the tune of something in the region of 7 billion. That's per annum.
With the hospital, it's about 8.7 billion.
But to the educational institution, you're somewhere in the region of $7 billion.
For UWI is 8.550944. That's 8,216,550,944.
Right. So that works out to pretty close to $400,000 per student.
Yes.
And I want to understand the disparity, because I would want to zero in on this, because the funding that you're making available to UTEC per student is somewhere in the region of $155,000.
Right. We fund UTEC to a total of $1,871,826,000.
Yeah. So I'm just looking at the
per student,
the breakout. Yeah. And I'm trying to understand it's this clear dissonance there, because if the two institutions are on par, and I have no reason to believe that they are otherwise, what justification do you have for making that one allocation, which is significant, or more than twice, to UA as opposed to? Is it that the University of the West Indies is operating at such a low level of efficiency? Because Professor Vassiana seems to be very happy with, to the extent that he can even charge low on the rates for his housing. I just need some understanding of what.
I think, Mr. Chairman and member, what we are doing, we have an issue of history, and so we are trying to catch up as it relates to the funding for the University of Technology. I know that before me now are some positions, UTEC, that we need to discuss with the management to have those properly established, so we can then come back to the Ministry of Finance and the Cabinet to provide that support for them, to get them get more subvention.
Does it have anything to do with our treaty obligation?
Well, certainly we have a treaty obligation for the University of the West Indies, and so the system of funding the University of the West Indies would involve the grants committee that we have to attend, and we will look at, there's this issue of 80-20 model that we have been looking at over time and so forth. But what I say to the council all the time is that what we fund the university is what is approved in the parliament.
And that's the easy answer.
That's what is approved in the parliament. So we can't go outside of what is approved in the parliament.
Okay, I take your point, but how quickly can we hope to have a resolution to that?
Well, for the parity issue is one that is ongoing, and Professor Vassiani indicated that there have been many discussions on the matter. Certainly, the Cabinet of Jamaica has been apprised of it, and they have sent us to go back to look back at some issues of the structure of the University of Technology, to have certain posts and so forth established, so we can come back to them now with the proper costing to fund the University of Technology.
Well, no, Prof. Yes, I'm coming to you, Prof.
Yes, Chairman, I just wanted to put on record that the University of the West Indies is cognizant of the contributions of the government of Jamaica, but I was going to reaffirm the point that we are a regional institution, only one of two in the world, the other being University of South Pacific, where the funding structure, the University Grants Committee funding structure, does require contributions from all 17 countries to a central entity, which is then redistributed. So there are some nuances in our governance structure which makes it slightly different. And research and outreach poses a lot of what we ask our faculty to engage in, which gets us additional mileage. And I'll invite you all to our research days, February 6th to 8th, where we're showing how research has influenced policy over the last 20 years out of our university.
Just as a clarity, what percentage the government of Jamaica subvention, if you take out the fees, what percentage of the subvention does it make vis-a-vis the other countries? How many countries you said?
It's 17 in all. The landed campus countries, Barbados, Trinidad, and Jamaica, contribute far more than the others, but there is a contribution from all countries.
But in Jamaica, what percentage would Jamaica be with relation to the rest?
I would need to do a little calculation on that, sir, but we can get this information back to you.
Sure. Member Paul.
Thanks, Chairman. When the UE was last year, I had raised two issues, and perhaps as both are here now, both UTech and UE, we could get responses. Firstly, I had raised the matter of student employment opportunities, and I had noted the establishment of Sutherland at URI. I was minister at the time when these things were initiated, and the opportunity that was provided for students to earn a living, which is a major aspect of the funding for students going forward, because it is always better, I believe, for the student to manage the financial obligation through actual earning. And I want to inquire if the university, if the universities see this as a continuing viable prospect for students. And associated with that is my second issue, because the UE did lament the parlor state of finances. And I had raised a point that in this day and age, we now need to see these institutions less for their cost-centeredness approach, and rather as profit-generating centers. And these bodies, where you have the largest concentration of brain power in Jamaica, that's at Grace Kennedy, it's not at Jamaica Boilers. The largest concentration of brain power is at UE, is at UTech. What are the institutions doing to become wealthy, to become rich, to become prosperous? And I know last time mention was made about the focus on expanding your academic program and to have students paying full cost And I know the housing is also a center. I know you do get involved in printing and so on. But I would like to suggest that that is limiting the potential of the universities. It could be contributing to the coffers of the government rather than the other way around if that concentration of brain power is used to establish viable businesses, not with you, Mr. Principal, as CEO, but to have a unit in the universities headed by a CEO to build viable businesses. Our economy has not been growing, and that must be a concern of the universities. And what better place to demonstrate financial viability to actually do businesses than at the universities, where you have such great concentration of brain power.
So, Chairman, thank you very much, Member. The University of the West Indies, its responsibility to try and grow the economies of not just Jamaica, but the entire Caribbean. In fact, our strategic plan talks about revitalizing Caribbean development. To start where you started with the Southern Global, when that was brought on, you were the minister and you would have known that Sutherland employed 70% of its employees were university students. If you can have students employed, you know where your tuition is coming from. When that was removed from the universities, it has been removed, yes. We lost that, registrar how long ago? 5 years? We're now, instead of operating it, which we did at a great profit, it was removed, and I do say removed, we didn't give it up voluntarily, because it was a major part of our financial structure. We lost student employment, we also lost the profit, and we lost the companies that we were doing the call center for. We are now relegated to almost just landlords collecting for the space that's occupied by Sutherland, to the point where the universities can we put on our own call center somewhere else. So we're thinking about it, but we do have to come out of this financial quagmire to be able to make such a large investment. But we are recognizing that if we can employ students, then we know where our fees are coming from, and that will take care of the student fee problem. But the university does need to grow and grow its income. Our business is teaching and learning. So yes, we have fee-pay programs. In fact, all new programs at the university are self-financing. That's a mandate that was made about 10 years ago, where we charge to recover on all programs. But beyond that, there are things that we can do. For instance, we've actively gone into the housing. That's why I was inviting Principal Vassiana to send some so we can collect. But yes, housing is one. We've gone in for our own water to reduce our water bill, and we save about 18 million a month now. We're about to go into a cogen plant where we're going to save a large amount again. So the idea is to reduce your costs while trying to grow your income. And the idea of a company of the university, there are 6 companies within the university which we are now restructuring to try and make all profit-making centers. And under this administration, if it's not profit-making, within a year, you will hear some of those entities closing, because we can't take any more hemorrhaging. We can't continue to offer a lot of the social support that we would like to, even if it is reduced or removed for a time. We need to get a period of consolidation before we can make the bold steps that we would like to make.
I think, yeah, but I'm just members. Is there anybody else that has a question? Just, all right, I wanted, you have more? All right, Prof.
Thank you, Chairman. We have an earn and study program which provides employment for our students, which requires us to pay out 20. So we are in that way seeking to facilitate our students. But we find that many of our students work, and we structure our programs to accommodate them. So there are many programs in the evening designed precisely to ensure that persons can work and then come to classes. We are encouraging our academic staff to undertake research, not only research in the abstract, but research directly related to the needs of industry in Jamaica. Our strategic contemplates that we would increase the value of income from that kind of research from $150 million in 2018 to $750 million in 2021-22. We are actively encouraging projects of that nature. We have talked with various private sector entities about possibilities located campus, but there is a space factor that we have to bear in mind. But we have been in discussions. We have also in place the Technology Innovation Center, which we're trying to bolster as an incubator for ideas. So private sector entities coming to the center, setting up offices and preparing their enterprises so that they can go out. That is an active part of what the university now does, and we have been in discussions with DBJ about ways of enhancing that initiative. So we are mindful of the need, of the importance of generating funding for our students and for the institution as a whole. And one other thing I would say concerning generating funding for students is that quite a number of our students work overseas in the summer period and come back and use that funding to pay for their fees. Yes, but there's a challenge which arises because they tend to come back a little late. And so they miss out the first 2 weeks of classes, and then it becomes a treadmill trying to catch up. So we are trying to encourage them to come back on time so that they can fit in properly in the academic program. But we are very mindful of the need to generate more funds, both as an institution and for students.
All right, members are trying to. No, member Don and member Jackson. And member Stewart.
Much of them have already been answered. But one I want to pick up on, two I want to pick up on in terms of government subvention. I just want to get a sense, professors both, in the case of UTech and thing, is there a deliberate attempt within the universities to manage reduce costs while expanding what you put out, because that's how your overall efficiency is going to be increased. And I want to submit that the burden of being successful in that regard is institutions like yours. Why? Because you have all the intellectual talent residing there that teach us in the public sector and in the private sector goals. So I just want to submit that as an academic institution, from a management standpoint, burden is overwhelming, because you can't do it, or you expect us to do it. And you